Namaste. This is the second part of the chapter Engineering, Science, and Technology. Here we are going to talk about textiles, shipping, shipbuilding, navigation, biology, biotechnology, electronics communication, and computer science as well. So let's start with textiles. There are some interesting facts about textiles that is displayed on your screen now. So you can read it on your own. It is known about textiles made in ancient India, especially through the references made in the literature and in the clothing represented in the sculpture figures. So, in Mohenjo-daro in Indus Valley around 3000 BC, there was a cotton textile industry, and endure fragments of this textiles impressed in the archaeological excavation items that correspond to this period, proving the existence. So, with the passage of time, textiles in India were made adorned with flowers and robes embroidered using the strands of gold. Descriptions of them had been mentioned in the writings left by the Greeks that correspond to the times of the campaigns of Alexander. It's also mentioned in these subsequent writings and references about the fibers collected from plants, especially the cotton weaving in India is approximately in the year 1750 BC. A management manual, the Arthashastra, that apparently dates from the 3rd century BC, mentioned ordinances to distribute the materials to spinners and weavers. So we'll come to the British now. The Company of the East Indies, around the year 1600, sent their ships to the India with gold bullion to exchange for fine cotton textiles. The British decided that because of the quality of the textiles produced in India was so fine and show so prosper future, it will be best to them establish their commercial stations known as factories. So that's how the factories have been set up. It will be incomplete to talk about textiles if we do not talk about muslin cloth. In the history of textiles, there is no name more famous than that of a Dhaka muslin. In 1875, when Edward VII, the then Prince of Wales, came to Bengal, Sir Abdul Ghani of Dhaka ordered 30 yards of the most superior muslin as a gift to the prince. 1 yard of this muslin fabric weighed barely 10 grams. Even today, among the aristocratic families of Indian subcontinent, dresses of Dhaka muslin are considered the ultimate luxury. In India, in English East India Company in the period between 1670 and 1720 imported on average about 15 million yards of Indian cotton cloth a year. These colorful textiles could resist washing and did not fade with light. That was something very appreciated by the merchandisers and the customers alike. They were sold as extremely fashionable clothes or ready made garments with exotic designs. Everything marked perfect to this industry until the late 17th century, in which a series of legal acts proclaimed to protect the European woolen limit and later complete ban on the trade, process, or consumption of Indian cotton cloth. And after the Battle of Plassey, Clive introduced import and export monopolies in Bengal, forcing any merchant attempting to import the cotton or silk from another state to pay a greater than 30% duty and forcing all export bound cotton and silk to be sold to the East India Company only. Failing to do so resulted in huge fines, imprisonments, floggings, and or forced indenture in an East India Company, that the local weavers were occasion reported to have cut their own thumbs or thumbs off to avoid weaving. So this may be a metaphor or whatever it is. So it made the life of the weavers very very difficult. So this is how the industry was crushed in India. This is one of the earliest industries that was destroyed by British in India and relocated the production to United Kingdom. This led to the Industrial Revolution in Europe and making the United Kingdom as the number one textile exporter, thus successfully replacing the Bharat. Okay, that is about the how the British played smart over here. Coming to the current day, the textile industry in India traditionally after agriculture is the only industry that has generated huge employment for both skilled and unskilled labor in textiles. The textile industry continues to be the second largest employment generating sector in India. Indian textile sectors is one of the oldest industries in Indian economy dating back several centuries. India's textile and apparel exports stood at US dollar 38.70 billion in the last year, that is financial year of 2019, and is expected to increase US dollar 82 billion by 2021 from US dollar 22.95 billion in financial year 20 up to November 2019 prediction. So that is about textile industry. So we'll move to the next topic, that is shipping, shipbuilding, and navigation. What is there in your screen? What is this picture? Do you know the story of this? I believe you know this one. So this is about Matsyavatar of Lord Vishnu. Do you see the boat? And the boat has some people over there. Yes. So you can imagine since how long our ancestors knew about navigation. So read the side note as well over there. So it is about Bhagavad Puran. So so he will come to know that how old the people were aware of this skill. The word navigation itself comes from Navgati. Now is ship or boat. So Navgati in Sanskrit. So now, so from that the word navigation originated. So Indian maritime history begins during the third millennium BC, when inhabitants of the Indus Valley initiated the maritime trading contact with the Mesopotamia. The Roman historian Strabo mentions an increase in Roman trade with India following the Roman annexation of Egypt. Strabo reports that during the time when Aelius Gallus was a prefect of Egypt, so he saw 120 ships ready to leave for India at the Red Sea port at Myos Hormuz. As trade between India and the Greco-Roman world increased, spices became the main import from India to the Western world, bypassing silk and other commodities. Okay, so we'll go to the Navy now. Who is the father of Indian Navy? Do you know? Yes, it's none other than our favorite Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. He has laid the foundation for Indian Navy. He was the first native Indian to build his own fleet of warships. It was literally one big wing of his military. He was the first to realize that command over oceans means command over trade and eventually the entire world. We can safely say that Europeans had a similar vision too. It's because of this he is considered as a father of Indian Navy. He built builds a strong navy who fought against Siddhis, British, and Portuguese. Marathas have not only huge ships like British or Portuguese, they generally use a mid-sized and a small boats for their operation. Shivaji Maharaj opened two naval dockyards for shipbuilding near modern Kalyan city and somewhere near Konkan. So we'll go to the Indian Navy. Indian Navy is the fourth most powerful navy in the world. The Indian Navy's first independent mission was against the Portuguese Navy during the liberation of Goa in 1961. INS, whenever you see that on the ships, so it will be referred as INS. INS is nothing but Indian naval ship. INS Vikrant was the Navy's first aircraft carrier and the oldest aircraft carrier in the world. The Sagar Prahari Bal SPB, which was formed in March 2009 after the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, is the unit of Indian Navy responsible for patrolling India's coastal waters. You would have seen Marcos or Marine Commandos, nicknamed as Magarmach, are the special operations, very secretive operation unit of the Indian Navy. The Marcos are given rigorous training that they can undertake the operations on any terrain. They face a 90% dropout rate during the training and recruitment. The Indian Navy has successfully completed an expedition to the North Pole and South Pole as well. Indian Navy was the first navy to send a submariner on an expedition to the Mount Everest. Look at the connection. A submariner deep inside the ocean to the top of the world. The sole ship lost by Indian Navy in a war was INS Kukri in the War of 1971. This ship was headed by Captain M.N. Mullah, who ordered evacuation of all the sailors on board and went to the depth of the ocean along with Kukri. We have to remember the supreme sacrifice. Indian Navy has significant contribution in combating Somali pirates in order to ensure safe passage of merchant ships. So it is Indian Navy who taught lesson to the Somali pirates who were there in Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea and created havoc some 6 7 years before. The Indo-Pak War of 1971, also known as the Bangladesh Independence War, was the first war when Indian Navy projected its might. In the War of 1965, Navy's role was to escort the merchant ships only. So, in the Operation Trident, the three missile boats named INS Nipat, INS Nirgat, INS Veer were communicating with each other in Russian as the officers of the ships knew Russian. So what was operation is? Operation was to attack Karachi port. So this got confused Pakistani interceptors about the reality of the boats. In Operation Trident, only three missile boats. These three missile boats only: INS Nipat, INS Nirgat, INS Veer. Only three missile boat of the killer squadron attacked Karachi port and incapacitated the Pakistani supply route. This is the greatest achievement of Indian Navy. And you will find lot and lot more amazing facts about on this particular subject. So I request you to go deep into this one and uh, explore more on this one. In the whole world, there are only two naval aerobatic teams. So, what are naval aerobatics teams? What are aerobatic teams? Aerobatic teams are that one you would have seen that one. There are some flights. Mm, they're performing some kind of action or some on the air. So it is a systematic exercise. So it is for uh, you would have seen that one. So there are some three, four flights will come together and they go into different direction and all these things. These are called as aerobatic. So a kind of acrobatic activities. So which will be very nice to watch. So this is something usually an air force kind of a thing we will do. But here you can see that on only two naval aerobatic teams in the whole world. So that is what one is with the US and the one is what we have is known as a Sagar Pavan. Okay, so that's an very interesting on Indian Navy. So please go ahead and explore on your own more on this one. So we'll move to the next topic. So I'll just give brief touch up on all the topics. I will not go deep into this one. So the next topic is biology and biotechnology. There are references to the microbial life in textbooks of medicines like Charaka Samhita. The lower life forms were classified into pathogenic and non-pathogenic. So it is some thousands years before only. So these were classified as a pathogenic and non-pathogenic. So what are pathogenic? So pathogenic are the bacteria that will cause or spread diseases like cholera, leprosy, TB. So these all are caused by a pathogenic bacteria. Whereas non-pathogenic are the ones that does not cause any disease. You know that one. So the fermentation, the milk turning into curds. So this is also due to a bacterial activity. So that is how this classification was as old as that time. So at that time only they understood. So does Charaka Samhita mention about virus? Yes. So you know that one bacteria and virus are different, two different things. Yes. So even in there is a mention of Charaka in the Charaka Samhita about the virus. So in the chapter there is a chapter called Krimi. So there is a mention of a term called Shleshma Krimi, which is described as something that cannot be seen by the naked eye, as they are Mahasukshma, which means they are so minute that one needs a special instrument to see that. So so that is what. So it is there's a mention. So this is really amazing. That one at that time also people like Charaka. So Charaka Maharshi and all they have gained this kind of a knowledge. The pathogenic organisms include microbes that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Technical nomenclature was developed for different types of microbes, and their shapes and sizes have also been described in Charaka Samhita. So the next one on this one only is on the biology only. So crescograph. So this is a device which will help in measuring the growth of the plants. So this is something that one invented by Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. So Jagdish Chandra Bose is the one who proved that even plants will also have a life. Okay, so let's move to another this one. So it is the biotechnology. So the biotechnology sector of India is highly innovative and is a strong growth trajectory, a very strong growth trajectory. It is there. It is a field which is not completely explored. There are a lot of scope in that one. So the sector with immense growth potential will continue to play a significant role as an innovative manufacturing hub. The sector is one of the most significant sectors in enhancing India's global profile as well as contributing to the growth of the economy. So India is among the top 12 biotech destinations in the world and ranks third in the Asia Pacific region. India has the second highest number of US Food and Drugs Administration USFDA. So that is what uh, it's a regulatory body. So which is approved for plants after USA and is the largest producer of recombinant hepatitis B vaccine. Out of the top 10 biotech companies in India, so by considering by revenue, seven have the expertise in biopharmaceuticals and three specialize in agribiotech as well. So there may be so many other companies. So let's move to the next chapter. So which is electronics, communication, and computer science. So there is you all are well versed about this one. There is I don't think that there is much I have to say on this one. So first thing is you are in Bangalore. As you are in Bangalore, you know every aspect of this field. Bangalore is known as an IT capital of India, Silicon Valley of India, etc. Lot of IT professionals are working for many companies in this city. So India's ITES industry grew to US dollar 181 billion in last year. So exports from the industry increased from US dollar 137 billion in financial year 19, while domestic revenues advanced to 44 billion. So IT industry employs 4.1 million people as of the last financial year 2019. So in if you say in America alone, in United States alone, there are almost 100 Indian companies which employ 1,13,000 people across 50 states and including District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. So there are already 100 companies. The total revenue of tangible investments made by these 100 companies exceeds 17.9 billion, thus by creating a job or opportunities in a foreign land as well. Also, research shows that Indian IT companies pay a lot better than their counterparts in United States. So in the electric and telecommunication field, there is a lot of opportunity for the growth. The Make in India initiative is all about growing these industries in India and provide a high quality output. So, what is the need as of now? The need of the hour is innovation. So, we need to make India a hub of innovations, and this can happen only if every school and college is compulsorily mandated to start an innovation hub. We need to develop a culture of innovation across not just education institution and also in the private organizations, but more importantly in all government departments as well. So last year, so India ranked 57th in the uh, in this global innovation index. So that is where this ranking will be given, and we have now graduated to occupy the 52nd spot. Even still, we are in 52nd. This progress is creditable and given Prime Minister Modi's vision. It won't be long before India gets into top 50. The larger aim, of course, is to enter into top 10. So if you look ourselves with China, so China ranks 14th. Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand rank ahead of India. Singapore is in 8th position. The small country Israel has broken into the top 10. The sanctions it Iran still manages to the rank of 61st. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, ranks 36. Switzerland, of course, tops the ranking. There is a top one, followed by Sweden and UK. So even India can do it. So we have to do it. So it is all depending on all on us. So this is something that one we have to do. Question is to have we really become a nation that truly pursues innovation. Actually, India can do lot more if we want to do. So an innovation mindset empowers the individual and the team to search for and deliver better outcomes every day. It is about understanding our strength and building engagement through the habits and tools. An innovative mindset unlocks the potentials in a contemporary workplace. To get there, India needs to not just overhaul its system but also its mindset. And that can happen only when innovation as a culture is injected into the DNAs of our school education system. So we all have to have this kind of indigenous thinking, independent thinking. So that is what the overall message of this particular chapter. So that's all for about this chapter. So let me know if you have any questions. So please post it into the WhatsApp group, or you can ask in the session that when we discuss these things. And I wish you all the very best for your exam as well. Do well, and let's connect in our session. Thank you. Jai Sri Ram.